I'm getting some gargly sounds. Hey folks, can you, hope you are able to join. If you wouldn't mind dropping in the chat that you can hear us if you're with us. Maybe as an icebreaker for the folks who are joining virtually. Would love to hear, what's your NHL team? Did you grow up, supporting a team? And I don't know, Jeff and Rob, if you guys are allowed to have an NHL team. I'm going to go ahead and assume that's not against the rules. Would love to hear yours as well.
Listen, it's okay. It's okay if you have a favorite. I am and a Lightning fan, but it's okay. I think you got to have something to root for. I mean, we want to see all 32 of our teams be successful, but unfortunately, not everyone can be successful. But hopefully, everyone out there at least has a fan. Is a fan.
I'm not as diplomatic. I'm a fourth generation Detroiter. My great grandfather was a Red Wings fan, so I am still. My heart is still in Detroit, so I'll leave it at that.
That's awesome. Those are the golden years, probably growing up a Red Wings fan.
Oh, for sure.
I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in the Bay Area, so I grew up a Sharks fan. And I saw, Jeff, I think you were with the Devils for a while, working on their team. A funny intro story is that Pete DeBoer, before he came to the Sharks, was the head coach of the Devils. And when one of my buddies from college is a hockey player, he played with Pete DeBoer's son in Pee Wee. And during the lockout, Pete DeBoer came in and coached their Pee Wee team. And so they had this little league hockey team that was coached by this, NHL coach. And I think the locker rooms were pretty intense. If they were leaving anything on the ice.
Listen, it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for the big guys to come down. My son plays, and we were actually at a tournament last weekend, and Rod Brindamore, who's the coach of the Carolina Hurricanes, his son plays. He's a Pee Wee. My son's a Pee Wee, and we show up to the tournament, and sure enough, he's coaching, their son's team. So it's so crazy, and our coaches got a kick out of it because here they are, some youth hockey coaches coaching against an NHL coach. So it makes for healthy competition. But yeah, it never gets old, man. It doesn't.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, we're 3 minutes in, so I'm going to go ahead and get started and say hi to everyone and welcome to the first content session of Wonk Week. So my name is Peter Tite. I am the Director of Customer Success here at Quorum. And before we dive into the content, I wanted to share a few housekeeping items. So first of all sessions are going to be recorded and shared with those who aren't able to stay the whole time or have to jump in to another meeting. And we're going to hold Q&A to the end from attendees, but definitely feel free to use the chat box and we'll collect those chats in throughout the session. And share them out at the end. So to introduce our first speaker here, let me just pull my notes over. So I want to introduce Jeff. Jeff Scott is the NHL's VP of Community Development and Growth. Jeff has 20 years of experience leading community investment and youth development strategies and initiatives across the NBA and NHL. Currently as VP of Community Development and Growth for the NHL. Jeff supports and creates the league's mission and strategies, which focus on changing the global conversation about hockey, making it the acknowledged standard for sports experience that are inclusive, accessible, enjoyable, and community-friendly. Throughout continued efforts, Jeff also positively influences and impacts the philanthropic and community investment decisions of all 32 NHL clubs, minor hockey affiliates, and youth hockey organizations relating to culture, youth participation, and social impact and sustainability. So if you are calling in from a nonprofit, you can harass Jeff if you want to make a form of partnership. Second here is joining us from the NHL is Rob Woolley. He is the NHL Senior Director of Legislative Affairs and Public Policy and Partner Development. Since 2007, Rob has served in multiple roles with the league, including management of the organization's diversity, youth development, and cause marketing initiatives. And Rob left the NHL in 2012 to serve as Director of Community Relations for the Detroit Lions charities for the Lions in the NFL. As we just learned, he's a huge Detroit loyalist here. And during his time at the Lions, Rob transformed the organization's charitable and philanthropic approach by developing a fully integrated social impact and community development investment strategy in support of the city's resurgence in Detroit. So prior to working in professional sports, Rob served in public policy research in the nonprofit sector for about 6 years at the Brookings Institute and as a public policy manager for the Power to Decide, formerly the National Campaign. And as policy strategist for the Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities, also known as Michigan Land Use Initiative. So that is my lengthy intro. Thank you for both of you for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you. I know that this is a really popular session at our Wonk Week. And so to kick us off, I'm wondering, Jeff, if maybe I could start with you, and if you could give us a high-level overview of the NHL's social impact work. What's your mission and vision at the NHL?
Yeah, well, first off, Peter, thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity. This work that we've been committed to for so many years would not be possible, quite honestly, if we did not have the support and partners like Quorum and you giving us a platform to just be able to just share the narrative, share the vision, share the mission, the strategies, and the things that we've been so committed to over the years. So to answer your question, at a high level, approach as possible, when we think about what the mission is for our social impact work, and if I can pause for one quick second, the way our department, the way our team is referenced is as SGL, and you giving us a platform to just be able to just share the narrative, share the vision, share the mission, the strategies, and the things that we've been so committed to over the years.
We're getting a little
so
late
to answer
here.
Your question.
Let's maybe pause for just a quick second, and hopefully if you pick up, it'll be back to normal. Thanks. Sorry, Jeff.
All right. Am I there, or was I frozen, or what happened?
I think you're good. I think we were just getting a weird audio thing, but go ahead. Thanks.
All right. I was gonna say I recognize that voice. Our mission is truly to understand how we're driving the long-term economic performance for our league, for our club, for our partners across the hockey industry, with a very pointed focus on our pursuit for inclusion, for access, and for cultural relevancy within the game. And where I left off before we had the little audio issue there is our department is known as SGL, which is Social Impact, Growth Initiatives, and Legislative Affairs. So from a social impact space, although we use the word social impact from a very broad lens, we understand that it's more than just the traditional community relations way of just doing good in the community. But the legislative affairs element of our business is something that is extremely important to the NHL at large, something that's extremely important for all 32 of our club partners, because we understand the power of the legislative space, right? And so with a lot of the things that we want to push forward to make sure our game is more inclusive, more, there's greater access, and there's more relevancy, we understand the power of that, which is why, we've been pointed around having that as our mission.
Love that. I think understanding the structure of the team is really interesting for folks because it's also, I think relevant to a lot of the other folks that we work with. And how do you structure a government affairs team alongside a community, engagement group or external affairs? So just as we're getting into the work that you're doing, can you give us a sense of some kind of key initiatives that you're working on in your world, Jeff, and kind of what makes up that work? What are the kind of types of activities that you're taking?
Yeah. So we got a lot going on, and I know we're limited with time. So of course I won't take you through the full breadth of everything that we're doing, but I will just kind of lay the foundation of not only the key initiatives, but why we prioritize these key initiatives. And really the first point is, we're a sports and entertainment organization, right? So of course we have to understand the importance of acquiring fans, deepening our partnerships, through various experiences, whether it's from a youth perspective, from an adult perspective. So acquiring new fans is one thing. Thinking about it also from an internal perspective, we have to make sure we're evolving our workforce. So the work that we're focused on around access and inclusion, guess what? We have to practice what we preach. So we also think about it from an internal leadership and workforce perspective. The third thing that we are really focused on is, of course, enhancing our reputation and our credibility. So we can't have all of these tactics and all of these initiatives in our work if we don't have that credibility to why we're doing this work in the first place. And then lastly, when we think about it, it's the cultural availability of this work. Social impact is a word that's been used very loosely here over the last few years, and when we talk about the cultural elements of it, we want to make sure that we're being we're making our sport available. We're allowing people to be aware of the things that are happening, and then being intentional around those underrepresented groups. So that's really the foundation first, right? Now, when we talk about what are those some of those key tactics or some of those key initiatives, first and foremost, we wanted to look at our organization from a top-down approach, right? When we think about it from an inclusion lens. So one thing that we're extremely excited about right now is the formation of our inclusion councils and committees. And we have 4 currently. We have an executive inclusion council. We have a player inclusion committee. We have a fan inclusion committee, and we have a youth hockey inclusion committee. So through all of those establishments, right, and those committees, you've noticed that it's from the top of our leadership structure and the top of our organization, from our executives, all the way down to the youth from our grassroots perspective. And so with these particular demographics and these focus councils and committees, we're able to prioritize and actually put structure and strategy around those initiatives so that we can make our game more safe, welcoming, and inclusive, right? So that's one key initiative that I want to share. Another one that's really a part B of that one is as it relates to our inclusion learning experiences. So education is power when we talk about social impact work, when we talk about access and making the game more welcoming. So we've partnered up with a couple organizations to help further our education in this process. And so our inclusion learning experience is something that our entire NHL office, from Commissioner Bettman all the way down to the most junior individuals within our organization, have gone through and will continue to go through these inclusion learning experiences. We've extended this opportunity across our hockey spine, right? And when we talk about our hockey spine, you think about the NHL, you think about our 32 clubs, you think about our major junior affiliate organizations, so the AHL, the ECHL, and just making sure that this education is able to permeate throughout our entire hockey ecosystem. So from like I mentioned, from Commissioner Bettman on down, from our 32 clubs, from our players within those clubs, from the officials that are, managing the process and the product on the ice, all the way down through the youth hockey ranks, we prioritize learning experiences, right? So that's another key initiative. And then from there, I can get down into some very tactical initiatives, but from our mobile museum, right, which travels around, the country, we visited 28 markets, educating folks around the contribution of our Black players within our game. We have our Learn to Play in our First Shifts program, which is a very grassroots program that eliminates a lot of the barriers that families are faced when they want to get their children into the sport of hockey. So that's and as I mentioned, we can talk about this for hours, but just thinking about it from a top-down approach, understanding the importance of establishing committees, right? Understanding the importance of education, understanding the importance of intentionality on who the target demographics are, and then making our sport more accessible through programs and initiatives are just a top line. Those are a few top line examples for you.
That's fantastic. So much to unpack there. I mean, one of the through lines that I'm hearing is the importance of kind of carrying this social impact work through the different stakeholder groups that you're engaging with. So whether that's the executive, the chairman level, the internal, employees of the NHL, down to the different, the different clubs and down to the youth. If you can kind of set that, that theme as an organization and carry it through, that really shows. So I want to change gears a little bit here, Jeff. And one last question for you is, can you tell me who is Willie O'Ree? And then we can kick it over to Rob for kind of the second part of this.
Yeah. And Rob, I'll jump into this. So really, Willie O'Ree is a legend. Right. Let me preface by saying that he is a legend. He is an individual who has sparked so much intention and growth and direction for us as a league. But as a man, Willie O'Ree was our first Black player in the National Hockey League. Was a individual who was a descendant of slaves, who was able to find a passion and a love for the sport of hockey. Was an individual who faced some trying and very unfortunate circumstances and situations that he was able to overcome and be such a trailblazer within the sport of hockey. And to this day, Willie is an ambassador for the NHL at 87 years old. Willie is one of the original founders of our Hockey is for Everyone platform, which, for those who don't know, is a platform for us where we've been very focused around creating opportunities for children of color to be able to have access and play our game. And so our Hockey is for Everyone organizations are comprised currently of 26 organizations across North America, where their mission is solely focused on bringing the sport of hockey at very low, if not free, barriers of interest or barriers of cost. So people and families can take advantage in our game. And so from that, which was initiated, in the mid 90s, here we are in 2022, we're able to tell amazing stories of organizations that are still providing hockey programs and organizations. We've seen new organizations pop up, and it's all because of Willie O'Ree. And we're so honored that not only for him being our first player or Black player in the National Hockey League, but for the work that he continues to do to grow the game, raise more awareness around our sport. And as some, like to reference him as the Jackie Robinson, of hockey, it shows the value of what he's been able to bring and contribute to our sport. So a true living legacy in his own right, and is a true catalyst to the work that we're doing today as we talk about growing our game.
Wow. Yeah. What an inspiring figure in hockey history and American history, North American history as well. So I want to kick it over to Rob, because you've been working really hard on getting some acknowledgement for Mr. O'Ree from the government. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've kind of been campaigning on as it relates to this?
No, absolutely. And again, I would just echo Jeff's sentiments, Peter, and thanking you and Quorum for welcoming us this morning. And I'll just say, double down on the point that Jeff made about Quorum's role in all this. I think that you all play such a quiet behind the scenes role when it comes to analyzing legislative and public policy data. We could not have gotten this done without your platform, without your software and resources and all the things that you were able to bring to the National Hockey League. So I just wanted to make sure that point was loud and clear. I mean, Quorum was the one. I think I probably logged into two things first thing in the morning. One was my email. The next thing was Quorum, because I got to see where things were in terms of our status on the Willie O'Ree Congressional Gold Medal. The NHL's legislative affairs work is very unique. It's a bit different than what you would probably assume. Very different than the other sports leagues. To Jeff's point, we are really committed to enhancing our reputation and building credibility with underrepresented segments through civic and community based leadership partnerships. And so, when we launched the SGL department, as Jeff had mentioned earlier, L is the legislative affairs piece of that. And that required us to really be intentional on Capitol Hill and to cultivate relationships with people that either love our game or have no idea what our game's about. And so a lot of the work that I do on a day-to-day basis is to develop and foster those positive relationships on Capitol Hill to inform people of the things that we're doing in our communities across the United States, including what our teams are doing to gain trust and credibility and establish relationships with local community leadership. So, of course, we're focused and monitoring issues, legislative issues that impact our business, that impact our clubs, but that's not what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. We retain lobbyists and other, lawyers and others that are focused on sort of those more day-to-day mundane legislative issues. We are truly focused on one thing, and that is growing our game, casting a wide net to get more and more people involved in our game. And that is part and parcel to what we do on Capitol Hill. Capitol Hill is an important partnership in all of this. Members of Congress are important to be informed and to be involved in what we're doing. And the Willie O'Ree Congressional Gold Medal Act was a tremendous catalyst to opening those doors and to helping us grow and expand that programming.
That's fantastic. So you teased this at the end. How did the push for the Congressional Gold Medal start? Was this something that he came to you, that his family came to you about, or were you just looking for opportunities to kind of to grow, the NHL's kind of brand recognition?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of people don't know that there's actually a Congressional Hockey Caucus that's co-chaired by Congressman Mike Quigley from Chicago, Brian Higgins from Buffalo. So you sort of like your big hockey hotbeds. Tom Emmer from Minnesota. We've got John Kako from Syracuse area of New York. Just a solid group of members of Congress that love our game. And Mike Quigley, Congressman Mike Quigley from Chicago, was really vocal and as an advocate to getting Willie O'Ree in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And in fact, he would stand on the House floor on 2 or 3 times a year during a 1 minute and just say, Willie O'Ree needs to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and eventually Willie O'Ree was in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And one time we had a chance to connect with Congressman Quigley, and he says, you know what? I think we should begin to think about getting Willie O'Ree a Congressional Gold Medal, which is the highest congressional honor bestowed upon a citizen. And by the way, Willie O'Ree was born in Canada, but he's also an American citizen. He just recently received his citizenship. That's not a requirement for a gold medal, but it certainly spoke volumes to Willie's commitment to the work he's doing in the United States. And so from that point forward, as a result of the congressman's leadership, we were able to launch our effort to award Willie O'Ree with Congressional Gold Medal. And thanks to the leadership of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley from Boston, she jumped on board right away. She had an opportunity. As Jeff mentioned, Willie O'Ree is an amazing human being. When he walks into a room, he lights up the room. He just warms your heart. There's not one bit of ego in that man. He's just a beautiful human being and connected with Congresswoman Pressley. Congresswoman said, Willie, there's not a lot we can agree on here in Congress, but we can definitely agree on you. And from that point forward, we had both Republicans and Democrats rallying around Willie during a time that was really tumultuous. We were dealing with COVID. We were dealing with lots of questions and challenges facing our country, facing politics. Willie brought both Republicans and Democrats together during a time when they really needed it. And it was a lot of fun to see it all unfold.
I think that's a really important point to bring up at the end there, is that, this is not, getting anything passed, as everyone on this call knows who works in legislative affairs, is not an easy thing to do, especially at such a divided time. So can you talk to us, just for some of the other folks that are, working on legislative issues, Can you tell us a little bit about your approach in securing interest from legislators? I imagine that the Hockey Caucus is a lock, but it's only a handful of folks. You need a lot more than that to get the bill passed. So what was the work you were doing to get people, what were kind of some of the tactics you were using to get people interested and excited?
It's a great question. Congressional gold medals are really hard to get passed. I'll just be honest. It is. I mean, most legislation is. This is really difficult because it requires 2/3 majority in both houses.
Oh, wow.
So that means before the bill even has the opportunity to leave committee and head to the House floor or the Senate floor. In the House, you need 290 co-sponsors. In the Senate, it's about 67.
Wow.
So the work that it took to get to that point, I mean, the bill was initially introduced in May of 2019, and we finally passed in earlier this year, 2022. So during the 116th Congress, we began to slowly but surely secure co-sponsors. 117th Congress, it picked up steam. Here was our biggest opportunity. Is that at the time the Willie O'Ree Congressional Gold Medal Act, when it was introduced, and by the way, it was introduced in the Senate by Senator Debbie Stabenow and Tim Scott. Both of them were just phenomenal in their leadership in getting that through the Senate. When we met with members of Congress about the Willie O'Ree Congressional Gold Medal Act, the first question they would say is, "Who's Willie O'Ree?" They had no idea, and which is common. A lot of people don't know who Willie O'Ree is, and that then just opened the door to so many possibilities for the National Hockey League to talk about the work that we're doing in communities across the country, the work that Jeff spoke about, our efforts to enhance our reputation and to build credibility in our represented communities. It really opened that door for us. But there was a lot of education that was required before we could secure that commitment as a co-sponsor. At the same time, the Aretha Franklin Congressional Gold Medal Act was floating around Capitol Hill. And that's an easy one, right? Everyone knows Aretha Franklin. So not that we were in competition, but it just took us a little more effort to get a member of Congress or congressional staff to understand Willie's impact. Once they understood it, and in some cases, once the member met Willie O'Ree, it was a lock-in, and they were so excited to support the bill. Really honored to meet Willie, and did everything they could to help move the bill along. So over the course of almost 3 years of cultivating sponsors and getting co-sponsors to jump on the bill, it really broadened our efforts to deepen relationships with the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. But in particular, the Congressional Black Caucus, Chairwoman Joyce Beatty was so instrumental in helping us tell Willie's story to the Congressional Black Caucus membership. And once she had an opportunity to meet Willie, to hear his story, she immediately stepped into action and recruited all members of the Congressional Black Caucus to jump on the bill, to co-sponsor the bill, and to voice their support for it. Of course, Jim Clyburn was incredibly instrumental in all that as well. Yebby Watkins and Clyburn's staff was incredibly helpful. But those efforts took time. And coming from the National Hockey League, we're not known to be a diverse organization, a diverse sport, both on and off the ice. But once Willie O'Ree story was told and we began to sort of broaden the scope and to open the minds of all these members of Congress about who we truly are and where we're headed, that really helped build that trust and credibility, and as a result, built new relationships for us.
That's fantastic. I think that that makes a lot of sense. It's the strategy, the tactics that you're using is not unique to probably getting a congressional gold medal. People do this on every legislative issue, but the hill you had to climb to get 2/3 majority is really, really impressive. So kudos, major kudos to you, and a real testament to Mr. O'Ree and all all of the work that he's done since leaving the NHL. That is, I think, really, really inspiring as well. So any lessons for you, Rob, that you can take away kind of coming out of this experience, getting this major victory on the Hill. Whether it's in things that you tried that didn't work, or things that really were effective, whether that's like in-person events with Congress, going in and knocking on doors, kind of getting in with the right people, or also internally, like how do you keep Jeff focused and saying like, hey, like this is something we really got to, you can have all the time you need to get this done versus working on all the other litany of issues that you're focused on. Any sort of takeaways or lessons that you think would be useful?
Yeah. First of all, I would say that from the top down, the organization was really supportive, and leaned in on this effort. From Commissioner Bettman, all of our owners in the United States, in particular, in fact, our owners collectively, and it was about a year ago that they collectively wrote a letter to congressional leadership encouraging passage of this bill. So we had support from the top down to get this done in support of Willie O'Ree. We also did this during COVID when Capitol Hill and post January 6th when Capitol Hill was all but shut down. I mean, we had, when we launched the bill, we were able to access Capitol Hill, have meetings with members of Congress, fly Willie into Washington. After COVID and what happened on January 6th, we weren't able to do that. And that's where, again, going back to quorum, where we really had to lean in on the technology and the resources that you provided for us so that we were able to get in front of staff in a unique way, and to tell Willie's story virtually, which was a challenge, but we did it. And so, in fact, the majority of our co-sponsors came during COVID and during a time when we had to rely on technology and in this virtual world to secure co-sponsors. So in a way, it was interesting opportunity and led to passage. So, like anything in Washington, anything's political. One thing that I was surprised about was how members of Congress were willing to vote for the bill but not co-sponsor the bill. We've heard a lot of that. Oh, I'll vote for it, but I'm not interested in co-sponsoring. Some members of Congress don't co-sponsor gold medals, and it's a personal thing for them, or it could be philosophical or whatever it might be. And so that's just something that was interesting to us, that we thought that was an interesting situation. But for the most part, members were 100% on board and willing to support and willing to go above and beyond. So I think that was a little bit of an eye-opening experience, that no matter how benign a piece of legislation is, there's always a little bit of politics involved, and that's okay. That's Washington, and that's part of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And, appreciate the shout out. Love that, we were able to help you educate lawmakers using quorum, hopefully at scale as well, kind of cutting through the noise, given all that was going on at that time. So I think it's a really, really wonderful story, and major congratulations to the work that you put in, Rob, over the last few years, as well as, to Willie O'Ree. So Jeff, I want to kick it back to you for a little bit and talk about kind of what does the future of NHL social impact look like, and specifically as it relates to the Willie O'Ree Congressional Gold Medal. What impact did that medal have on the broader efforts that you're talking about in these other communities?
Yeah, the future of the NHL from a social impact space is bright, and I'm saying that just because it's our, what we live, eat, breathe, and sleep around every single day. But when I think about what Willie's story has been able to do, it's been able to elevate the narrative of highlighting and raising the education and the awareness around underrepresented individuals within our game. So just like Willie being the first Black player in our game, guess what? There's a first Asian player in our game in Larry Kwong, right? There's a first Indigenous player, first known Indigenous players in our game, like Fred Saskamoose or Taffy Abel, right? There are first Hispanic players in our game in Billy Guerin, right? So when we think about what the future of our sport looks like, it's realizing and educating our fan base, as we like to reference, our fans in waiting. So those are those individuals who aren't yet NHL fans, but we're converting them into NHL fans, into the broader population of just understanding the history within our game and within our communities. And so we're excited about that because we've been very pointed on identifying key moments throughout the year where we do have a core focus and we have a heightened awareness and initiative around those multicultural demographics that I mentioned, right? So here we are in October. We understand the significance of Hispanic and Latin Americans. So you'll see a heightened focus in that, right? As we transition to November, December, right? You'll see more conversations around Indigenous and Native Americans, right? As we transition in the earlier part of the year in February, you see the focus around, Black history. So those opportunities are great opportunities for us and will be positive for our future because now we're normalizing those conversations, right? We're normalizing those narratives of those trailblazers and those individuals and those current change makers and those future leaders who will be a part of our game. And in addition to, from a multicultural perspective, what Willie was also able to bring is the fact that many people don't realize that he actually played this game with one eye. So when we talk about individuals with disabilities, right, there are so many individuals who are walking around, whether it's a mental disability or a physical disability, but we also have a heightened focus around that sector, right, around normalizing and making sure that we're providing those opportunities and that history around that story. Because the way people think about Willie as, his forward-facing presence of being a Black man, people don't realize that he played the game for 20 plus years at the professional level with one eye. So imagine playing hockey as a Black man and with one eye and still being successful at it, right? He's created so much, opportunity and so much optimism for individuals. So we'll continue to highlight that. And then, to build, we want to focus on the LGBTQ plus community, right? We know that that's also a heightened priority and focus for us as a league when we talk about inclusion. And it all stems, from this work as we start at the top of this call around Willie O'Ree, right? And what he's been able to do and contribute to this game. So the future is bright. We've been able to experience a lot of support across the hockey ecosystem, as I talked about earlier, with more people wanting to be a part of this movement. And that's only something that we can be excited about as the game continues to grow.
Wow, that is amazing. I cannot imagine playing professional hockey, let alone skating backwards and doing it with one eye, and gotta be hard to find depth perception. That is a really, really impressive accomplishment. And
Peter, he did that at a time we were just on the cusp of civil rights moving in the country. We only had 6 teams in the league, and he played in Boston, and so there was a lot of really interesting dynamics around his experience when he became the first Black player in the National Hockey League. Notwithstanding the fact that he was blind in one eye.
Wow. And that context is so important. And I think that's that education piece, right? I really liked what you said, Jeff, about the fans in waiting. I think we think about, maybe customers in waiting. Folks haven't signed up for quorum yet. Maybe borrow that term. But I think an interesting question, and I'm totally fine if this is not something that you have or you can't share, but I'd be curious to know, to the extent that you're able to tie either directly or indirectly any of the work that you're doing on, diversity, equity, and inclusion within specific kind of disadvantaged groups, to tie that to actual numbers of like fan attendance or number of community nonprofits that are engaging in hockey events. Do you have any sort of tracking for that, or like kind of to bring that back to the business and tie it to the bottom line, or is that sort of next step, or is that an interesting place that you'd like to get?
Yeah, no, so it is something that we have committed to improving, right? And not only just from an external facing agenda, right, but also internally. So we've taken some really pointed steps with just understanding our employee demographic, right? With just taking that baseline assessment of the research, so that when we talk about wanting to, our game to be more inclusive, we also have to exemplify that in how we hire, and how we recruit, and how we retain, and how we elevate, underrepresented individuals within our current organization. So yes, we're capturing those metrics right now. We actually have in about a week, we'll be announcing a DE&I report. And this DE&I report will speak to a lot of those points that you're asking about right now. Is, what's our baseline metrics and understanding of who we are from both internally and externally. Over the course of these past few years, we've put a lot of pressure on our governing body, USA Hockey and Hockey Canada, specifically USA Hockey, and they've been able to update their registration platform to capture the ethnicity and race of individuals, so that we can now go back and track the growth year over year. Because in years past, it was what's your age, what's your gender, what's your email and your address, right? So we weren't able to actually track how our game is diversifying and growing. But now we actually have those baseline metrics. We're able to see, through all of the programs that we have, both from a USA Hockey perspective, as well as some internal programs that we have, like our Learn to Play program, our NHL Street program, our Future Goals program, where we're able to capture those metrics and be able to see that, this year we were able to have, a 20% increase in minorities, within our game. We're able to see a 60% increase in girls and female participation in our game. So then that way we're now tracking our trajectory, able to look back to see what are we doing differently that's wanting people to that's bringing people to our game, because they do feel like they can be participants and be safe and welcomed within it. So if you really want to put a goal out there, you have to know exactly what you're striving for. And as Rob mentioned earlier, we are hyper focused on growth, but specifically, as you look at that next level down, growth within individuals who are underrepresented within our game.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, and excited to see the DEI report come out. Quorum has a DEI report that we put out every year. It's a little easier to pull that data because we're 330 some odd person company, not a big organization with lots of different partner organizations and affiliate orgs. So I'm sure that's a Herculean task, but the really, really interesting stuff there. So Rob, just to close your section out here, any other legislative initiatives that that you're thinking about, or are you going to be making another push for a congressional gold medal for one of these other trailblazers in the NHL, or is there kind of any other kind of big initiatives that you're thinking about that you can share with the team?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think right now we're really focused on post-COVID recovery as it relates to youth sports and youth sports participation. And Jeff had mentioned our efforts to really hone in on youth participation within the BIPOC and girls community and girls participation at the community level. There are also lots of there's a huge need for hockey infrastructure improvements across the country. A lot of our rinks were built in the 70s and 80s and need some love, not only at the local level, but all across the country. So there are lots of efforts and conversations happening on Capitol Hill right now about how do we get more children back on the field, back on the court, back on the ice as we come out of COVID, and in particular, for communities that have been sort of marginalized post-COVID. And so we, as a league, believe strongly it's our responsibility to help foster an environment where all children and families feel welcome in our game. And that starts at the community level to begin to soften the challenges and barriers to access and affordability. One of the best pieces of legislation out there right now related to this particular issue is called the FIT Act. And John Thune in the Senate, Mike Kelly in the House have really taken the lead on this particular piece of legislation. What it would essentially do, real briefly, it expands what would be eligible under what we all know of as our health savings accounts or flexible savings accounts to include the registration fees, equipment fees, sort of the various registration fees that are association fees that are required to get on the field, on the court, on the ice. And the FIT Act is one of the best pieces of legislation out there to help soften the blow to getting families back in the game. We don't have a ministry of sport in the United States. Youth sports is generally, we yield to the private industry and local community volunteers to figure it out. There's very little national policy around youth sports. I think you're going to begin to see that change a bit under the Biden administration. Members of Congress are really hyper-focused on youth sports through either mental health pathway, or it's even really truly a kitchen table issue for both Republicans and Democrats. How do we help more and more children get back in the game as we deal with so many issues in communities across the country? So we're all in on that. And I know the other leagues are too. We understand the urgency that we need to get more kids more active across our country. And so we're gonna plan to focus on legislative opportunities through that lens.
That is awesome. Yeah, I love to hear that, and I think it makes a lot of sense that you would coalition with other other interested organizations, other leagues. Yeah, fascinating. I've got a million more questions for you, but I do want to open it up to the audience as well, because we've gotten a couple in. So first question that we have from someone in the audience is, probably this one's for you, Rob, but how did players get involved in the Willie O'Ree initiative? Were they involved at all, or did you focus on them as a stakeholder kind of group in the work?
It's a great question. Some of our players did get involved to a certain extent. The challenge that we faced with the Congressional Gold Medal Act was that the players that were interested in helping us were Canadian. And so a lot of the Foreign Agents Registration Act and other sort of barriers to quote unquote lobbying for legislation presented itself when we had a couple of our Canadian players that raised their hand and said, we're in, like, what can we do to help? And there was only so much they could do, in terms of writing letters or going to Capitol Hill and that sort of thing. But for those of our American players that were really committed to seeing this get done, they were willing to either reach out to their members of Congress or to send an email to a congressional staffer. We had a lot of that happen, a lot of owners, a lot of team executives. We had Kenan Thompson, SNL celebrity, Saturday Night Live celebrity, was willing to write an op-ed in support of the Willie O'Ree Congressional Gold Medal Act. So we were able to bring in support from all different segments of our hockey family and our hockey community, and players, alumni, owners, team executives, celebrities, you name it. Anyone that knew Willie O'Ree and had a chance to meet him or understand his story, they were in to help voice support. The other thing, Peter, I would mention is that, the one thing I didn't mention earlier, the thing that was really helpful for us to get this thing done was for members of Congress to hear from their local community, to hear from constituents, not just from Washington and New York City. So working with USA Hockey, which is the governing board for youth hockey, we had children and families and coaches and all sorts of youth hockey organizations writing letters, sending cards, sending emails. That was really helpful and very important, because members of Congress want to hear from their community. They want to hear from their district and their constituents as to whether or not this is something they should support, even though in their heart they want to hear from their voters.
Yeah, they want the back, the taps on the back when they get it done.
That's right.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That kind of we call stake or grass tops advocacy as opposed to grassroots advocacy, working with the owners, players, celebrities as well, getting them to kind of take higher effort, action in support, like writing an op-ed, is a really kind of way to get things passed in Washington, as you know. One other question, probably for you, Jeff, is how do you adjust your social impact efforts for different cities where teams are located? Is that something that you kind of control at the national level, or do you leave that up to the teams? And do they have kind of community organizations, or how does that all work?
Yeah. That's a great question, and it's evolved over time, right? So what we do from a league's perspective is we set the core focus for the broader audience, right? For our broader partners in this space. One thing that's different, of course, that makes the NHL unique in comparison to other leagues is we're North America. So we have to understand the uniqueness in Canada and the uniqueness here on the US side. And we also have to understand that they are not a monolith, right? We are we have to treat them as two separate entities. So the way you talk about, engaging the Black community in the U.S. is going to be very different than we talk about engaging the Black community in north of the border. So what we essentially do is we lay out for the entire year, we lay out what's called our content calendar and resource guide. And what this is, it's literally the blueprint or the playbook for all 32 of our clubs to understand from a league's perspective, who are our target multicultural audiences, who are our target underrepresented community, what are our key social impact initiatives, and what are our general moments. But what we want to do and what we encourage our clubs to do is understand what's important for your market. And an example of that will be, let's use San Jose, right? As an example. We understand in San Jose that they have a very, high population of Asians within their community, right? So when we also think about, the Hispanic community or the indigenous community or even the Black community, right? Although we have all of those key focuses laid out, we don't want our clubs to be, have a half-ass activation across everyone, but go deep into that particular demographic that's important within your market, right? So we want that local feel to permeate through their activation. So we really communicate that out to our clubs with understand who your majority minority is, create deep and sustainable and rich programming and activation within those communities instead of just surface level things, because we want our approach to be felt on a 365 approach, as opposed to this one-off. We're going to have a theme night. We're going to bring in all of, our Asian communities, into this one particular, and then we're not going to engage with you come the following night. Right. So that's really the focus, is we lay out the structure and the strategy from a league's perspective, but we empower our clubs to go deep with those communities that are majorities within their communities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've got a template if anyone's interested. I'm sure someone can post it in the chat for a similar kind of content calendar. But I think it's a really interesting model where you've got these affiliate organizations that are going to be doing their own work. And if you can set that guidance from the league's level down and say, hey, this is the focus for the month, but also these are the markets that we're interested in. Kind of here's our take on what would be effective. That's a really interesting approach. So we're coming up on time. If you don't mind, I'll ask one more question from the chat or from the Q&A bot here, which is, I believe the NHL has gotten into some get out the vote initiatives. If so, how has that played into your overall strategy for engagement? Maybe for Rob.
Sure. Yeah. And it's a great question. And it's definitely something that not only is the NHL getting involved in, but so many brands across the country and all the sports leagues are doing something around encouraging civic engagement, particularly as we head into the midterm elections. Why are we doing it? Because our fans expect it. In particular, our future fan, the Gen Z, which is probably the most outspoken and politically active generation we've had since the baby boom generation in the late 60s. They expect it, and because they know that the future is at stake, and so they're looking to brands like the National Hockey League to leverage our influence and our power to encourage fans to get involved. We don't take stance on any political sort of issue. We don't take a stance on candidates, or we generally keep a very centrist sort of point of view when it comes to politics. But when it comes to getting involved and supporting civic engagement, whether that means registering to vote or getting out to vote, we are going to do everything we can in our power to send that message out to our fan base and also our future fans, right? So we've partnered with a tremendous organization this year called Headcount. For those of you that attend festivals throughout the summer or go to concerts, Billie Eilish, Harry Styles, Lizzo, you will see Headcount volunteers running all over the arena, all over the venue. We are the only sports organization that as a partner with Headcount, as a sort of a pilot. We're trying it out because we know that they have access to Gen Z and in a very deep way. So we always laugh in the office because we see Headcount's promotion when they say, oh, we're going to be out, at Billie Eilish, and we'll be at Harry Styles, and we'll be, at Lizzo and the Boston Bruins. Or like, it's just kind of a funny group of folks that are involved in this work. But we're committed to it, and we want to use our assets to encourage our fans to, in this particular case, check your registration status, see if you're registered to vote. If you're not, and if you choose to do so, take the next step, register to vote. And we just launched a contest that concluded yesterday that would award a 4-pack to the Winter Classic at Fenway Park. All you had to do was check your registration status, and we had more than 5,000 people jump on that. So I know Headcount just announced that they registered 150,000 people this year, and we're proud to know that we were part of that.
That's awesome. And if that was the nudge that you needed listening in, go check your registration status. Please do.
Good. Yeah.
Go to an NHL game. You might have a booth there to do it for any future fans on the call. So thank you so much to Rob and to Jeff for being so generous with your time and your thought partnership. We are just thrilled to be working with you, and really heartfelt congratulations to Willie O'Ree and his family for the Congressional Gold Medal on his legacy. It's really an impressive effort. So just as we're coming up to the end of our time, next session here for the folks in the audience is coming up at 12. It's going to be interactive with the Beekeeper Group's Alex Dixon. Alex is going to lead attendees through a workshop to build out your next campaign plan, whether it's lobbying or advocacy or launching a Congressional Gold Medal effort in 60 minutes or less. To join the session, go back to the main Wonk Week page in the Hublio website, and you can find a link to it on today's agenda. So thank you so much for everyone, and thanks especially to Jeff and Rob.
Thank you for having us,
Peter.
Thanks, guys.
Got it.
Bye-bye.